Parent Wins, an adventure of a lifetime. A global expedition dedicated to collecting stories of environmental and cultural preservation while conducting marine research aboard sailing vessel Resilience.
So we had to leave the boat for a week or so, like 10 days, which is sort of a big deal for us to leave the boat. We were lucky that a friend of a friend was able to watch the boat for us. But then when we got back to Panama, the boat was fine, that was amazing. But we had a lot of work to do, just getting ready, provisioning, had new people come aboard, as sort of always, and so getting everybody situated. And then it was time to go. Going through the Panama Canal it's not really too intimidating anymore. This was our third time going through. So the Panama Canal, basically, to go through it, let's say we're starting like we did on the Pacific, you're going up to 2 locks. You'll go into them, you'll pull in, you'll get secure, the water rises, and then you pull forward to the next one, you get secure, they close the door behind you, the water rises. On the Pacific side, you then have a small lake that you go through, and then you have one more set of locks that you go into, close the door, water rises, go out. Then you have Lake Gatun in the center, which is pretty big. It's gorgeous, extremely gorgeous. It wasn't until like halfway through the day, maybe 2 or 3 in the afternoon, so maybe a little bit longer through the day, that we realized that we were taking on water very quickly and significantly. And realized that our float switch for our bilge pump also wasn't working in the area that we were taking on water.
We were like low-key sinking, but it was like a very under control situation. It's also not something that you can fix in the middle of the Panama Canal. So we were like, all right, let's just keep going. Let's get through the canal. We'll deal with it when we get to Shelter Bay. So we had my sister Allegra stationed down here next to the bilge pump. And she was manually pumping it out because our float switch wasn't working for the automatic bilge pump system. And so, yeah, she was just standing there next to the button, keeping it pressed the entire time.
How you doing down here, Allegra? Good. It's a little hot and sweaty, but someone's got to pump the bilge, make sure we don't sink.
And so we were constantly taking in water and pumping out water. And luckily, going through the last 3 locks back down into the Atlantic Ocean, they told us that we would be tied to a tugboat. And so what that means is that the tugboat is tied to one of the walls, and then we are tied to the tugboat. So we only need 2 lines going to the tugboat, which means we only need 2 line handlers, which means that it was totally fine that Allegra was stationed down here pumping out the bilge.
We still had one more stop, which was Guna Yala, which is also known as the San Blas Islands and as part of Panama, but Guna Yala really is its own nation. It's its own nation of indigenous people. The area is called Guna Yala. They have their own government and they see themselves as separate from Panama. We were planning on leaving Gatun locks, entering in the Caribbean and going straight for Guna Yala, but as I said, we were taking on water. We had to get to a dock, and luckily a marina called Shelter Bay, which is just across from Cologne in the jungle. Luckily, Shelter Bay had space for us.
So the next morning, Trip got on the phone with the company that creates the dripless shaft seal, and they had awesome customer service, and we got the issue figured out within a few hours, and we were good to go. It was great.
So when we were in Panama, still in Panama City, we were planning on going to Guna Yala, but we really didn't know what exactly we were going to film there. While we were at the marina, though, I ended up talking to the boat next to us, this guy named Marco Brusi. But I ended up talking to him and telling him what we're doing, and he said, oh, like I know people there. I've actually been doing work in Guna Yala. He actually had just raised a bunch of money for the school there. And so that was an unexpected connection and something that I really didn't understand how big it was until, here we are. But basically, Marco had worked with a guy named Ernilio Lopez a lot there, and so he said he'd connect us via WhatsApp. And I thought, okay, that's great. I'll know one person among a lot of people and so on, and maybe we'll connect and so forth. But turns out that relationship he had with Ernilio is bigger than I had realized. Before we left the dock, we actually met Ernilio's wife, and they also brought some medicine that they needed to figure out how to get to Ernilio's mother. So now this whole thing is coming together, and next thing we know, we're bringing this medicine to Guna Yala for Ernilio's mother. Ernilio we haven't met. So we're headed out of Shelter Bay Marina, and we are currently driving along the jetty, the breakwater, and about to pull into the Panama Canal and leave the canal zone. We're headed for the San Blas Islands, but they're known by the indigenous people there as the Guna Yala. Day one of showing up in Guna Yala, Ernilio came onto the boat and sailed with us for like 5 or 6 days.
We're Dubugan.
Where? Que es good.
We.
Sí.
Dubugan
Dugan.
es isla
Sí.
o
Ok.
comunidad.
Ernilio was great to have aboard because he was a great ambassador to the island. And one thing is we still had a language barrier. We're English speakers with a little bit of Spanish. And then a lot of folks here actually still speak Guna, which is really cool, that the language is pretty well preserved. And so, it's just interesting. 'Cause even if we're communicating really well with Spanish, there always is a little bit of a language barrier, but there are little moments, and it's typically around food that people come together and that you don't really need to speak a specific language. Food is good, food is good. And so we went out to Benedict Island. There's 2 of them actually, but one of them, the further one, Ernilio had a friend that's a chef out there that's trying to start his own sort of business, cooking for mainly tourists and whatnot.
¿Por qué?
Bewa gumbi. Webi gumbi waru ganda tuwe.
But we ended up eating out there and just having an incredible meal, and the excitement and the look on everybody's face, just showed how enjoyable that whole scene was. After this whole time of sailing through the islands and doing all this stuff and touring around the islands with Ernilio, we went back to Nalanega. And that's when we really dove in deep. We started having deeper conversations about what the community was going through and what they needed.
We came to Guna Yala because they are a people that really are on the front lines of climate change. One of the big needs of the Guna Yala people is access to clean, safe drinking water. So how they get water is they take big jugs, they get in their canoes, they paddle all the way to the mainland, and they go to this one river. And so when we were talking to them about the river, they mentioned that it's been drying up every year recently, which is crazy. We're in the tropics. This is where rain happens. We are in the latitudes of tropical rainforests, and their rivers are drying up. Yeah, climate change is present in everything because it's changing the system. It's changing how weather functions, and it's making these patterns that have been going on for centuries more erratic.
It's daunting the amount of challenges they have ahead of them. They're already seeing changes in their environment and climate. You know, talk about their water source drying up, and honestly, we've talked some about the amount of fish that they have on the reef is not nearly what it used to be. Water, electricity, all these things are sort of adding up to seem really daunting and seem really difficult. But it was interesting when we first met Arnelio. We had him on our boat. We left Nalunega the first day, sailed out to Chichime and to Benedict and to another Benedict and Dog Islands, all these places. But we were trying to talk to him about climate change. And we did some, but he said, really, you need to talk to the teachers. You need to talk to the folks at the school. And it came down to, really that the kids are our future. That's what he was saying. Really, we need to talk about that. That's the big thing here.
Mi visión para la escuela Nalunega, más que nada, es integrar los valores que se practique, éticos, morales, ¿verdad? Para llevar a cabo una buena educación en nuestros niños y que también que se reserve, ¿verdad? Y que practique la cultura cuna. Hoy en día mis compañeros, mis docentes que laboran en esta escuela no podemos trabajar bien, no podemos usar en la actualidad que se está utilizando lo que es la tecnología porque no tenemos la luz eléctrica para poder trabajar. Me gustaría tener varios proyectos para la escuela. Número 1 sería el reciclaje, ¿verdad? Enseñemos a nuestros niños, ¿verdad?, del cuidado del medio ambiente, ¿verdad? Hoy en día se está viendo lo que es el cambio climático.
Ahorita mismo tenemos conocimiento de que, según reportes del Smithsonian aquí en Panamá, ha estado cada año subiendo desde 4 a 8 mil litros de agua. Nosotros no estamos preparados y puede ser hoy que pueda ocurrir. Hace unos años atrás yo fui víctima de cambio climático. Fui víctima de un tornado que hubo aquí en Nalunega. La casa donde yo resido, vivía en la parte de arriba. A las 7 de la noche vino una especie de tornado con lluvia, truenos y relámpagos, todo. El mar muy alto, todo. Se llevó los techos, se llevó casi todo, me mojó todo y yo estaba debajo de una mesa. Me recordó la película que hubo del tsunami en Indonesia. Quiero que entiendan esto, ¿no? Cuando uno lo vive, no es lo mismo decirlo. Hemos recibido talleres, pero es muy esporádico, van y vienen. Y queremos pues que estos jóvenes, por ejemplo, los niños que tenemos aquí en la comarca de Guna Yala y en especial Nalunega, comprendan y tengan conocimiento de por qué nosotros debemos de proteger nuestra madre tierra, nuestra Pachamama, nuestra identidad, nuestra idiosincrasia indígena. A pesar de que yo soy panameña, yo tengo sangre cuna. Yo estoy mezclada, soy mestiza, mi papá es cuna, mi mamá es latina. Así que yo tengo parte indígena. Y gracias a Dios tuve la oportunidad de conocer esta hermosa comarca tan espiritual, porque sinceramente dentro de unos años puede ser que Guna Yala desaparezca. No lo estamos viendo ahora, lo veremos después. Y nuestros cunas se van entonces a emigrar a la ciudad de Panamá. Y allá van a tener que buscarse otro destino, otra vida, no lo mismo que aquí. Aquí es un paraíso.
Hoy por hoy vivimos en una isla, ¿verdad?, rodeado de la naturaleza, gracias a nuestro Dios, la riqueza que tenemos. O sea, nosotros tenemos, por decirlo, oro, valemos mucho, mar, la brisa, la cultura cuna es hermosa. Y hoy por hoy me siento súper orgullosa de pertenecer a mi cultura cuna. Cada comunidad, cada isla tienen sus leyes, ¿verdad? Pero en general todos, tradiciones, culturas, lo practicamos hoy en día, ¿verdad? Me contaba mi mamá de aquellos años, casi 250 años, nuestros ancestros, nuestros abuelos vivían en el bosque de Darién, esclavizados, ¿verdad? Que llegaron los coloniales, ¿verdad? De quitarle todo lo que nos pertenece hoy en día, lo que es, le decimos, nuestra madre tierra, nuestra Abya Yala, ¿verdad? Todo lo que ves el paraíso. Gracias a quién? Gracias a los líderes que pelearon, que lucharon por la tierra, por nuestra madre tierra, Abya Yala. Y de verdad, sí, ¿qué tal si nuestros abuelos no hubiesen luchado por nosotros? ¿Dónde estaríamos hoy por hoy? Pregunto yo. Y hoy en día es todo nuestro, gracias a nuestros abuelos. Gracias a ellos estamos libres de que podemos tener nuestra mola puesta, nuestro oro y ver que la cultura cuna se mantiene intacta y vivo. Y así vamos a enseñarles a nuestros estudiantes, generaciones en generación, de mantenerlos vivos. Yo quiero mantenerlos vivos y que mi sueño y futuro de que en cada escuela enseñémoslos lo que es nuestras tradiciones y culturas a nuestros niños, para que eso en el camino no se pierda, sino continúe en generación. Y algo importante también, me encanta lo que es el medio ambiente, ¿verdad? Cuidar nuestra naturaleza, nuestra madre tierra, porque por tanto luchó nuestros abuelos y hay que protegerlos, mantenerlos vivos.
Climate change is a symptom of a larger problem. Climate change is a symptom of people not being connected to each other or nature anymore. And it's really important to look towards cultures that still have that connection, to learn from them. I mean, we went freediving with one of the leaders of the community, and you can tell that he has such a connection to where we were in the world and where we were diving. He knew exactly where he was on the bottom of the ocean. He was like a fish down there. I mean, I had such a hard time keeping up with him, and I am a certified freediver. He was incredible, and that comes from being in that same ocean day in and day out and interacting with that same environment and learning about your one little space in the world.
We came into Guna Yala with all these ideas of climate change and environment and culture and the story that we were going to get. We had the conversation about that story. Ended up being completely different than what we had expected to find. What we did find, or what I think we're starting to consider is, and chew on and learn from this experience, is that the future is uncertain. We are seeing changes everywhere around the world, environmentally, culturally, socially, and I think that the lesson that is starting to sort of build within me and I think for a lot of us here as we look forward is that a strong community, a strong identity, strong communication within that community is such a key part of survival and happiness and resilience.
We'll be leaving Guna Yala soon, and it's kind of a bittersweet goodbye because it's really incredible here, and it's really amazing to feel the connectedness here.
Every day now, I'm looking at the weather multiple times a day. We're getting to that point where it's time to finally do another ocean crossing. This one's difficult. This one is pretty strong wave action, pretty strong winds, on the nose for the first few days, through pretty renowned pirate waters, and basically we'll be sailing from San Blas, from Guna Yala to Florida, and I'm just really excited to get back home.
If you want to access more content, consider joining our community on Patreon. You can find details in the video description. Thank you so much for watching. We couldn't leave Guna Yala without building strong relationships. Even though we've sailed on, we're still in contact with our friends there. This said, we're working to do what we can to help the island of Nalu Nega with their need for drinkable water and electricity. On this front, if you're interested in helping, please reach out to us by emailing info@apparentwinds.com or by messaging us through social media. We'd love to share ways to support this incredible community.